I'm very excited to be teaching this 5-part course in improvisation. The idea behind this, my fascination with improvisation started when I was very young. Even I would hear certain, regular melodies on the radio, or I would go to hear something in the theater or so on, and I would buy the score to that piece, and I would be so disappointed that it was just the rough skeleton of it, but nowhere near the sophistication and complexity of what I heard this person do on this recording of their arrangement of this piece. And so I began to listen to these recordings and try to mimic what these artists were doing at the piano. And so I even as a young person had concerts where I would put, Andrew plays this and this, embellishments by Andrew Focks. And so I was always very curious about what else was possible. And then as a young kid, I didn't know that could actually be associated with classical music, that that there are questions about Bach, about Mozart, about so many places where improvisation is an integral part of the musical language. And so when I discovered this, I became really absolutely fascinated with all of the possibilities that were there, because I feel like to be a really complete musician is to be at least conversant in the musical language. Which is a little bit different than only studying a score and replicating what is written. Although, of course, that is hugely important. I think that a certain flexibility and mastery, eventually, of the different languages of music allows you to move through them with much greater ease. And so the improvisation course comes a little bit out of that psychology, if you will, of on one hand, looking at what makes musical languages sound like those particular languages. What are the building blocks of them? What makes this sound like Schubert versus this sound like Mozart? Now, of course, these are hugely vast questions, but one can at least, begin infiltrating under the surface and looking at what some of these things are. And improvisation for me, in terms of the approach of it, has to do with having certain constants and certain variables, because of course to sit down and say improvise something is actually a little bit overwhelming, because where do you start? But if you have a certain harmonic progression, can you improvise a chord tone melody above it? Can you insert passing tones? Can you do half note melodies against a whole note a chord progression? Or the opposite, can you have a melody and put certain chords with it? Can you have a certain theme introduced and be able to create a variation of it, to change it from major to minor, to be able to add octaves to it? Because improvisation, we always associate it with the changes of pitches, but it's not only about pitches, it's about articulations, dynamics, pedalings. In a certain way, improvisation is spontaneous variation. And so, what is it that I have as my foundation? And now how can I build variations on it? And so there are going to be so many different ways that these things are explored throughout the course. And it's also going to be designed to be catered to the music that individual students are studying. And so if they have a Baroque minuet, if they have a Mozart sonata, if they have music, like that, we can explore those sort of things, because all of this comes from going back to something I said earlier in our conversation about exploring what could be on the page and what isn't. And so one can even look at, regular fixed repertoire where there are no blank pages or sections, and look at what could have been there. And that arsenal one can bring into one's improvisational skills as well. And so it's going to really go at the art of improvisation from a whole host of angles that is geared towards, first of all, making students able to improvise themselves. For teachers who might be interested in it, we'll certainly look at different ways of approaching improvisation, which could be applicable to various students at different levels and at different stages in their development and at different ages. And it's also going to look at the possibilities of ornamentation, and how to embellish repeats and so on and so forth, which again will be catered to the individual pieces and repertoire that students might be able to bring to it, and we'll kind of improvise that as it pans out, because I want it to be something that is very relevant to the music that students are studying, and also supplemental to be able to give them a kind of confidence and flexibility in musical languages that they don't yet have. And in the gigging world, there are many times that people are asked to improvise certain things. And so being able to manage that and have that not seem intimidating at all, and knowing how to handle that challenge should it ever arise, is certainly one aspect that we'll also be talking about. And then the other side of the improvisation course, I think, is that even if you don't go off and improvise for the rest of your life after this course, you go and you perform, a Chopin nocturne or a Bach prelude and fugue. The goal of this course is that you gain a certain understanding and flexibility of what is possible that will do a few things. One, it will give you the ability to be more spontaneous in performance, and have a little bit more comfort and security when you perform pieces of music by memory. Having the understanding of musical languages and how to speak and improvise within those languages makes learning music much faster, because you can almost predict to a certain amount what might be there. And so, I equate it to, if you were memorizing, I don't speak a word of French. And so if you gave me a script to memorize in French, it would be a monumental task for me to do so. If you gave me that same thing and gave it to me in English, for example, it would be a much, much, much more manageable task. And so having that kind of understanding of the languages that you're operating in can very much make the learning of that music easier. It can make memorizing that music easier. It can give you a greater sense of comfort and spontaneity on stage as well. And so I believe that by studying this, it of course gives you new tools in the toolbox, but those tools can also be applied to all prepared repertoire as well, and help get that to the next level as well. So that's a little bit of the mission behind this. And I'm very excited to see what challenges and what ideas students bring. I've had the great privilege to teach improvisation many different times in many different contexts, and I'm always so stunned by the extraordinary creativity of students. In the end, often they're a little bit intimidated at first, but once they get into it, it's kind of amazing what they reveal. It's a whole new dimension to their artistry and their creativity, which they can bring with them no matter what kind of task is in front of them at the piano or in music.